All right, welcome back. So I'm going to go over a couple of the basics about printing in Java, just to the console window, and also data types. Okay, so all the data type stuff we're going to talk about is basically the exact same as in C. So we just spent a lot of time in C. You won't have a lot of relearning. Okay. So I'm going to take our Hello World program from the last video where I just compiled our first program, and we're going to modify it, okay? So again, the class has to match the file name. So if I want to make a new one, I would go, okay, let's make a new file. Let's go class. This one is playing with data types, okay? That's a really long but descriptive name. Notice that it's common just to differentiate between variables and classes. Classes start with a capital letter and variables start with a lowercase. So my class starts with a capital letter, and then every word afterward would start with a capital letter, and there wouldn't be any spaces. Okay, so I'm just going to copy this, and I'm going to Control S to save, or I'm going to go up here and go Save As. I'm going to paste in that name and make sure I've selected Java source file or .java. Okay, and I'm going to save it. That's again to my desktop. So it's right here. We can delete our old stuff there. All right, so we've got playing with data types made, nothing in it. Now, for beginner, you can just take this public static main void. You'll hopefully get enough practice doing this yourself that you'll start to understand a little more. And as the class goes on, each one of these words in this signature line will make more sense. To begin, just know that this is the main function. So whenever you compile and run your program, this is the only function or method that gets called. From then on, everything that runs is you saying, okay, first line, like call on other method, and then do a loop, and hold on one second. All right, we're back. Just outside, I've got a lot of noise, so I was just playing it back to see if it was bothering you guys. It didn't seem to be too loud. Okay, so again, this main method is the only thing that gets called when you compile your program. So we're going to do all our work in here. Absolutely later on, we will add stuff out here. We'll make some member variables for the class. Out here, we'll import other modules, other classes that we're going to use. But for now, let's keep it simple. Okay, here's our class. Inside, to make a variable, you do it just like you did in C. You go int a equals 1, or you can just create 3 separate variables that are integers. We've got floats. These are terrible variable names, but I'm just showing you that we've got ints, floats, and doubles just like we did before. Okay. I would highly recommend looking through our class Google Slides, so I can pull them up right here. The first one is just on really printing and the basics here, and it goes through what system.out.println is, and that's what we're going to do in just a second. And then you also have a whole set of slides on variables and data types, and it goes through a lot more detail on each data type. I just want to show you on slide 16. These are all the primitive data types in Java. Notice that it differentiates between a byte and a bit. So a bit is actually a 1 and a 0 in computer memory. Usually when we talk about how much memory something takes, we talk about in bytes, kilobytes, megabytes, not in bits. And so 1 byte is 8 ones and zeros. And so 1 byte of information can hold a number up from positive 127 to negative 128. It's essentially 2 to the power of 8, because there's 8 slots that hold a 1 or a 0, so 2 to the 8th is 256. That's the number of, that's the amount of information it can hold. They just shifted the 256 down, and so half of it is negative, half of it is positive, and it includes 0. Okay, a short is a little bit longer, so twice as much in memory, so it can hold bigger integers. An int is even bigger, so this is the most common one we do. So this is 4 bytes or 32 bits. And it can go to about -2 billion and +2 billion. And that's good enough for most of what we do with integers. But there's also larger integers called longs that hold a lot more. You can see just going from 16 bits to 32 went from about 32,000 to 2 billion. So this gets even larger. Okay, and then floats and doubles hold decimals, and it's just the amount of precision you want. So if you want to be really, really close to that decimal, you could use a double. But if you want to save on memory and like computation speed, you could use a float if that like crazy precision at the end of the decimal isn't as important. And then we have single characters. So essentially this just holds a numerical value, and then there's a table of known characters, and then you just say, oh, I want character 87, and it looks at the table and it pulls up character 87. And then a Boolean is simply 1 bit. It's either a 1 or a 0. It's true or false, but that is a primitive data type. Okay. Now, because we create all the data types in Java, it can do a lot of soft conversions for us. So for example, if I create an integer a that's 1, and I create a float b that is 1.5, and then I go to print, so I'm going to say system.out.println. So what this literally means is I've got a class called system that's always accessible. It's the main one we use to interact with the terminal, as a lot of other things like quit and clear screen and basic things like that. One of the variables in that class is called out, and it has a method inside of it called println. It's actually coming from somewhere else, but that's the basics. So there's a class called system with a variable called out, and then a method called println. You can also just use print. The difference is print will keep printing on the same line. Println, will print and then hit the enter carriage return where it goes to the next line. So that's why I'll commonly use this one, but absolutely there's cases where I'll switch back and forth. Okay. Well, the nice thing here is because it knows every single data type, I could just say the value of A is, and then I can hit like end the quote and then plus and then A. And so it knows this is a string, and it knows this is an integer. And anytime you combine a string with any numerical value, it knows that really what you want is one large string. So it's going to turn this number 1 into a string 1, and then it's going to concatenate the two. So essentially it will go like this, and then it will become this as it prints. That's the idea there. But we could also do the same thing down here. We could go system.out.println, and I could say the value of A plus B is, and then over here I could go, okay, first order of operations, I want to add A plus B. Okay, so what it's going to do is it's going to say, well, you're adding a 1 plus a 1.5. Those are different data types, okay? But Java says you've already clearly declared that one's an integer and one's a float. So I have a preset way to put those together. And I think I have it up here. Yeah, so widening your automatic type conversions. So what it means is if you combine, say, a byte and a short, it goes, oh, you must mean the more precise one, the one that holds more information, the one that takes up more memory. So it says, oh, a byte plus a short would be a short. Or an integer plus any decimal, you don't want to just lop off all that decimal information. It goes, oh, let's keep all that precision. So an int plus a float would always end up being a float. Or a float plus a double would always end up being the more precise the double. So it does that automatic conversion for you. So here, A plus B would be, okay, well, an int plus a float. Don't get rid of that 0.5 information. It's going to turn this all into a float. So it'll give us 2.5. So let's save this. Okay, I'm going to right click up here. I'm going to open in CMD. I'm going to go Java C to compile it. I'm playing with data types .java, compile the program. Oh, I've got an error. I totally forgot. So when you create a decimal, it's automatically assumed to be a double. So if I go down here and do double C equals 1.5, or let's make it a different number. That's totally correct. But here to say make a double and save it as a float, it's saying, well, you can't shove a more precise double into a float. You're going to lose information. And that's why the error said that's some sort of lossy conversion. You're losing precision by trying to go there. And how do you want Java to just shave off information? So instead, to denote a decimal that's a double versus decimal that's a float, you put a little lowercase f there. So let's save that. Okay, let's go back over here. All I have to do is hit the up arrow to compile it again. No error. Notice that it just generated that .class file. Then I go Java, plain with data types. I don't need the .java there. I hit enter, and I do get the value of a is 1, and then the value of a plus b. So it does correctly add the 1 plus 1.5, save it as a float, and then it joins it with other. Oh, I misspelled value there. Okay, so let's fix that. All right, so I'm going to add a couple more here. I'm going to say we've got a bool called tf, and it's equal to false. Whoops, lowercase, I forget. We've got character, let's call it letter, equal to C. Notice that characters I use single quotes for. Let's see, and what else? That's most of the data types. Let's do system.out.println. The value of tf is, and again, I just put a plus there and it'll automatically convert it to a string and join it. So I'm going to say plus the tf variable, then system.out.println. The value of letter is, and join it with letter. Whoops. There we go. So I'm going to save that. I'm going to go back over here. Now notice if I just run the .class file again, nothing's changed. And that's because, again, I haven't recompiled it. So I go, okay, let's recompile my new saved information. And I can see there's a blue disk right here because I've saved it, right? If I make another change, it's red. So I save it, so I know it's blue. I recompile that newly saved information. Oh, right. That's a different language. Okay. It's Boolean is the data type. I get mixed up between C# and Java because I go back and forth so much. Okay. So I control S to save it. It's blue. I go back over here, up to compile it. No error. And then I'm going to go up, down. And I'm going to do that last one there. And there we go. The value of TF is false. The value of letter is ISCO is C. I didn't put a space there. Control S. Let's go back over here and recompile. So you can see I'm playing around. Mistakes are totally okay. That's where the learning really happens. But those are the basic variable types and the basics of printing. Notice if I changed all of these to just print and not print a line, how that would change. I'm going to go Control S. I'm going to go back over here. I'm going to go up to compile, up, down to go to more recent and hit enter. And look at that. So it said the value of A is 1, and then on the same line, it never hit the enter key. It starts the next thing. The value of A plus B is 2.5. Again, it starts right after that. The value of TF is false. And so the only difference with that print line versus print is just, does it go to a new line at the end or not? Remember also you have your escape sequences. So I could always put like a \T in here. That tabs in. In the middle of this, I could put a \N. Now I'm going to go back in here and put print line in all of these. But notice just those two changes. So this tabs over. This says go to a new line in the middle of this line. And then the other ones are less special in my mind. Let's just do one more line below this. System.out.println. And then we're going to do a few symbols. So we'll do \\. That just shows a single backslash. And \, single quote. And \, double quote. And that's good for now. Then we actually put a second double quote to end it. And you can always look up, so we could look up Java escape sequences. And let's just click on the first one here. So these are just showing you some of the common ones. But the main thing is that a single quote, a double quote, and a backslash are actually special programming symbols. And so what this backslash before it is saying is this next one should be handled differently, backslash. Oh, so ignore the programming side, just show the character. And that's what it does here too. Handle the next one special. Oh, single quote. So don't use this as a programming single quote. Just show the single quote. And then same thing. Otherwise, without this backslash, this whole string would end and this double quote would be like, what? What's it there for? Error. So instead with this backslash, said ignore the programming implications. And so this double quote matches with this one, and these are used just as strings. So let's go ahead and save that. Let's move it over. Let's go up to compile, up, down to run. And there we go. See, we get single backslash, a single quote, and a single double quote, just printed as strings. And then notice also the backslash n here after value, that cuts off this line, goes to a new line, and even the space there, right, starts off the next line. So it looks almost like it's indented. And then of TF is false. So that's the rest of this line. And then back up here, I tabbed over the value of A plus B. So if you go up, the value of A plus B got tabbed over. Okay, so that's just some basics on data types, how to print, and then also some escape sequences. All right, you guys, hope you enjoyed that, and hope Java's getting a little more, you're getting a little more confident in the basics of Java. All right, good luck.